There's coffee in that nebula.
How you doing, fellas?
Oh, shit. Okay.
That's not decaf, is it?
Viennese cinnamon.
Good morning, USA and everybody else. KGRA, we are here, and Dawn is in charge today because we got a very special episode of UFO Wednesday, which is a discussion between two people who've never had a chance to meet, who are going to meet here now, right this moment. Are you ready? There they are. I'm going to move them up into the top positions here. And we'll move Dawn here. Yeah,
This
Marc.
is like tic-tac-toe.
I'm trapped. I'm in a box.
Brady Bunch.
And Bill has actually decided to join us today. So as poor Chanel has to produce this show, Bill's sitting here like a lump on a log, telling us how he loves everybody on the top row, but nobody else.
Bill and I are going to be discussing our respective chest congestions.
Oh, geez.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
we are.
Oh yeah, we should have got DePerno here too, so he could complain about his chest congestion still, because he got that rhinovirus too.
Well,
was
before
sick.
we begin, how you feeling, Gary? Because you've been going through some stuff.
I'm 40% better. And I would like to say it was the ibuprofen, but thank you for the ibuprofen. Both you and John sent me ibuprofen.
Oh, wow.
I've got enough to last me for a couple of months now. But boy, I got to tell you, nerve pain, it's something else. And it's just, that's it.
Well,
But I'm
I'll tell you,
40%
buddy, I get all my ibuprofen from the VA, Veterans Administration. And as you know, and I've told it, and as a matter of fact, just very recently, I had a bout of nerve pain in my amputated leg. It was absolutely excruciating, and ibuprofen doesn't help me a bit. But on the other hand,
It's nerve, yeah.
the VA gives me hydrocodone for that pain. I took that; it
And I can't
didn't
take it.
help either.
No, it doesn't help. It just makes me want to throw up.
So
ibuprofen doesn't help.
I put a
I'm
put
sorry
a
to laugh,
layer.
Don.
Yeah, I put a layer of whiskey on it, and that helped a little.
There you
bit,
go.
but,
A layer. I like that.
How
I'll
are you and
take a
Vicky
layer,
feeling now,
Don.
Don? How are you and Vicky feeling? Better?
oh, Vicky is a lot better than I've been. For 2 weeks, I have been. Well, if life were a cesspool, okay, I was at the bottom of the damn pump. It's been well, as a matter of fact, last night, and there was no way I was going to miss today's show. Last night I went to bed at 9 o'clock. Okay, 9 o'clock,
Wow.
so I'd be rested up for this morning. But yeah,
That's pretty early.
that's pretty
It's
damn
damned
early.
early. It's 0 dark 30. Hey, before we get going here, I do want to say good morning to all of our audience that's here on YouTube. Andy Morrow, Anima Confusa, Love of My Life. Slasher Fred is here. D-Bud Martin, Dragon Ruse, and of course the lovely Penny is here. And Lady V Elements has joined the house, and I'm hoping she's excited about this discussion this morning as I am. And of course, I want to say good morning to our audience at KGRA. And look, guys, everybody enjoy this discussion because I'm going to be quiet and learn something. I'm in the box now. I'm in the Paul Lynn box. Fuck Bill.
Good. Oh, by the way, I know that Lady V and Andy are big fans of your show, for sure, because they've been pushing your show everywhere.
Outstanding. And Lady V's awesome. Do you know what the V stands for? Monkey Jeebus is finally here, John.
Venus! It's
All right,
Venus!
great. My man Jeeves.
Yes. So Don,
There we are standing
I've
on the
said
beach with
our
our
good mornings. You
samurai
take
swords
back over.
waiting for the Spanish to land.
Well, when John's done. Go ahead,
Hey,
Don.
it's 7:00 this morning, right?
Yep.
I had just had my fruit smoothie for breakfast. Okay.
Oh, thank God.
I
you
was
didn't
Well, at
cleaning-
least I waited till you got your fruit smoothie.
I was cleaning up the kitchen and the phone started ringing. And I said, who in the hell can that be? So I answered the
It's a
phone.
crank
It was
call.
John. It was John. Well, we're on for 8, right? Yeah, John, we're on for 8. Yes, we're good. We're good. Okay.
He calls me in the middle of putting
at-
my underwear on. I'm
I'll
putting
be
my
there at
underwear
20
on.
till, right? I said, yeah, John, 20 till.
John calls me and I'm like,
Hey,
I'm in
Mark.
the middle of my underwear are half on, and the phone rings. I'm like, hello? Oh, hey, John. Yeah, I'll be there. I'm getting dressed. I'm getting ready for the show. He's pumped for this
Hey,
morning,
Mark.
man.
Yeah, John.
Mark, this is a friendly discussion. I am a friend of MUFON and all people associated with it.
Okay, guys, let's get this puppy on the road.
Fair enough, Don. And
Sergeant Ecker has spoken.
All right.
oh, you only made it
Sergeant.
a sergeant? I thought it was more. I thought we got higher up there.
As they say in the Army, he worked for a living.
Yeah, he's the only one,
Okay.
probably.
Okay, are we all done? Jerry, was there Jerry, was there anything else?
Nope, we're gonna put you in this position right now, and you do your
Okay.
thing.
All right, first, everybody, welcome to this morning with Gary and Don and coffee all around. This is our UFO Wednesday show. Today, we've got a very special show with two very longtime friends of mine personally. I've known these gentlemen for many years. John Brandenberg, Dr. John Brandenberg, I've known going back to about 1989, 1990. Marc Dantonio, who has been the chief photo and audio analyst for the Mutual UFO Network. I've known Marc, although I will say not quite as well as John, but I've known Marc since the very early 1990s. I have the highest regard for him. As a matter of fact, on KGRA, Marc has his program Sky Tour, where Marc is a known and noted astronomer. He's got a telescopic setup in Arizona. Every week he brings literally the wonders of the universe to the audience. And today we are going to be talking about Mars and whether the planet had an intentional catastrophic episode or not. But Mars, okay, has always been prominent in human history. Mars has been considered, going back to the Greeks and the Romans, as the god of war, primarily because of its red rust color. Okay, Mars is a planet that, before something happened to it, very likely was a close twin of the Earth. It is widely believed that in its early days, Mars, in fact, harbored life, had water, had an atmosphere, and then something unforetold happened to it. Now, Dr. John Brandenberg, who has been a long and noted Mars scientist, went back to the late 70s, the early 1980s, after a series of photographs were taken of Mars in an area today known as Cydonia. Cydonia had what appeared to be artificial constructions on it. As a matter of fact, pyramids, and most astoundingly, a mesa that appeared, and it's theorized by some, that it has a humanoid face carved into the surface. The famous, or perhaps more accurately, infamous face on Mars. Now, over the years, Brandenberg has written a series of papers about Mars. It is believed that at some point in our distant past, Mars may very well have had a humanoid type civilization there. It's also believed that something happened, whether it was a natural catastrophic event or perhaps an artificial catastrophic event, that basically destroyed the habitability of the planet Mars. Now, that's what we're going to be talking about today. A number of years ago, Dr. John Brandenberg wrote a book called Life and Death on Mars, the New Mars Synthesis. And in that book, Dr. Brandenberg discussed finding elements that suggested Mars suffered a catastrophic nuclear event, a nuclear attack on Mars. There was an element discovered called Xenon 129, which can only be found in two areas, either a supernova or the detonation of a hydrogen warhead. Now, had it have been a supernova, very likely Earth would have been massively impacted, just like Mars was. So, at any rate, that is what we are going to be discussing. Now, Marc Dantonio, on his last appearance, indicated that he did not accept the explanation that it was a catastrophic event. Now, what we're going to be doing next is, having introduced both John Brandenberg and Marc Dantonio, I'm going to give each man 5 minutes to state his position, and then we will begin the discussion. Now, Marc, I'm going to have you go first and give your position on why you feel this thesis is incorrect. And then I'll have John come on after you're done and basically give his response. So without any further ado, let's bring both John and Marc on, and let's take it from there, guys.
Who's going first? I'll put him in your position.
Marc, please.
Okay, Marc. Here we go.
Okay. Actually, John, it's very nice to meet you. Don, thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Nice to meet you, Marc.
I've never met John. I read his things. I know back in 2011, he wrote a paper at the Lunar and Planetary Conference that suggested Mars had a natural nuclear reactor. And we do see that here on Earth in the Okla region in Gabon with uranium. And so I was intrigued by that possibility that maybe a natural reactor had occurred in that region. Now, that was 2011. And in that paper, there was no mention whatsoever of any nuclear war or anything like that, but just a discussion of the possibilities of a natural reactor. And I could accept that that's something we could look into with future missions, study some of the composition of the ground. There's some silicates that are very important to examine because they bind up some xenon that gets released long term. But I noticed that, and I don't mind if John responds with me here. I don't, it's like a 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I've got to build on things that he says too. So I don't mind if he wants to reply to me. But with Lyot crater, Lyot, Lyot crater, he suggested that was a potential source of the explosion. Now I looked into Lyot crater actually quite a lot in the past, and and there's a number of reasons why. Number one, it didn't have a lot of secondary craters near it, which was a very interesting thing because normally when there's cratering on any planet, you would expect to see a splash of stuff that comes out and hits and makes more craters around it. We see it on the moon. In fact, there's whole papers about secondary craters on Mars, and Lyot crater is one of those locations that doesn't really have a whole lot of secondaries. So, you initially think, wow, could it have been an explosion? Well, it kind of, all right, take that into consideration because that would be a singular thing if it blew out. But, if it wasn't as big, you might expect, that some of that material wouldn't have fallen very far. But it's Lyot's not a small crater. It's not the largest crater either, but it's medium size. But Lyot crater, I looked at, it was formed at a time when Mars had already lost most of its atmosphere. And that was interesting because the climate on Mars was gone long before the Lyot impact, based on all the chronology that is out there. And having lost the atmosphere, having the atmosphere being depleted at that point, now there's several epochs in Mars. Okay, there's the Nochian, which is early volcanic stuff. It was again an atmosphere that was building. Then there was the Hesperian epoch. That's when water was actually on the surface and the atmosphere was a lot thicker. And that was Hesperian was around 3 billion years ago. Nochian 4 billion years ago. But the Lyot occurred in the Amazonian epoch, which is when all the water was now bound up as subsurface ice and ice sheets at the poles. Okay. So the thing about that is, Lyot's at mid-latitude. It's not in the middle. It's not at the very top. It's sort of in mid-latitude. And the ice sheets on Mars have migrated in the past, and they're known to have migrated, to these mid-latitudes. So the region where Lyot crater is could have had an ice sheet. Now, if there was an impact on an area that had an ice sheet, you wouldn't get secondary impacts. They would have fallen on an ice sheet, and the ice sheet is anywhere between 20 and 300 meters thick in the theory. So that means that anything falling there, okay, first of all, it'd be ejecta. We call it ejecta, right? Stuff that's blown out of a crater that's just impacted, right? And this ejecta would be hot. It'd be around 250 degrees Fahrenheit, okay, estimated. And it would fall onto the ice. Now, the Lyot crater, all right, is if you suppose that maybe there was an impact onto an ice sheet, all right, these Mars climate models show that there could have been an ice sheet there, so we know that that's possible. Now, the interesting thing is if you look at Lyot crater, the area around Lyot crater is riddled with washout valleys that occurred in some way. Now, no one at the time knew how these could have occurred until David Weiss at Brown University did a study with his team, and they discovered some very intriguing and interesting facts about Lyot crater. Now, and it has to do with the fact that it's possible that the Lyot crater valleys formed around the whole crater. So you have the crater and then all these rift valleys, formed by water. It's possible, he says, that in fact, very likely that these were formed with meltwater from the impact onto an ice sheet and into a subsurface permafrost. Now, how does one even prove anything like that? Well, there's a lot of clues. There's a lot of evidence for meltwater, in fact. Okay. First of all, if it was an explosion that was like a 100 megaton explosion, which I think, John, isn't that the number you had suggested?
That's roughly. It's larger than that. It's roughly the same impact energy as Chicxulub, which wiped out the dinosaurs.
Okay, all right. So if you keep in mind that had Chicxulub occurred on ice planet and permafrost, at the point of impact, the temperatures would have been so high that any water, any melt water that could then subsequently flood from that location outward would have been vaporized with those high temperatures. There wouldn't be a lot of water left over to do this. And the reason I say that is because if it was a nuclear explosion, then the meltwater in the quantity required wouldn't even remotely exist. That's one of the problems I have with the theory. Okay. And, to carve those valleys, which we're talking about with this 100 megaton explosion, where's the water going to come from? Now, the second thing is, I find that at odds with the nuke theory. But the other thing is that this material, all right, that would be blown out and the melt water that would then come in, let's say from an impactor as opposed to a nuclear thing, okay, has an ejecta blanket. The craters form and the stuff splashes out and then comes back down to the surface, and that forms a blanket around the crater. All right, we call it an ejecta blanket. Well, that ejecta blanket has these valleys in it, except for one very important thing. The valleys are under the ejecta blanket. They're not on top. You would expect if, say, the stuff was blown out and formed rain clouds, it rained down on the surface, it would wash away ejecta and form a valley. But the ejecta blanket is relatively free of valleys. They're coming out from underneath it. All right. And that's, that's something that's very important to follow here. And if you think about how much, based on the ice sheet theory and based on the permafrost theory, how much water would be liberated in that impact with Leo, we're talking about thousands of cubic kilometers of water, more than enough to form these galaxies. I'm an astronomer. More than enough to form the valleys, all right, post impact, and so that's very important too, because it kind of shows those valleys under the ejecta shows something very important. It shows that the melting or the thing that formed those valleys was probably the meltwater, all right, and it was also a time when all the water was locked up. All right. In other words, it was bone dry already. The atmosphere had already collapsed. The climate was already gone. And now we just had a frozen, barren Mars that was water free on the surface. And that's something we see with craters. You look in crater walls on Mars and you see where there's certain, at the walls, if they have a slope crater like this, we call this a simple crater, right? And they just do that little bowl. Well, on the edges of some of these bowls, you see this area that's burst out and something flowed down. Well, that thing that burst out was possibly water under pressure to this day. So there might be water deep inside Mars' surface that actually can still be in liquid form. We found a reservoir on the South Pole that might actually harbor microbial life. And it was, more than a kilometer or two down underneath the South Pole. So there's still liquid water, but it's locked up in at the surface. It's certainly frozen ice of all kinds. At the poles, it's carbon dioxide ice, etc. So that's the issue I have, and that's just with the Leo crater. Now I have a problem with the Xenon 129 as well, and that's something that I don't know if we want to do that now or we want to let him respond to the Leo crater thing, or what do you want to do, John and Decker? You tell me what you want.
Let's go with the crater first. What do you think, Don?
Yeah.
All right. So is it John's turn now?
Yeah.
All right. Moving.
Oh, Marc,
go.
Thank you. And you're obviously studying Mars very carefully, especially kind of the mainstream view of the history of Mars, which is it kind of died. It had warm, wet conditions early in its history, and then in recent geologic times, the last 3 billion years or so, that it basically died and froze up. And that's a very conventional view. The problem with that is that they now have found water channels and evidence of standing water on even, by the way, they determined the ages of terrains on Mars by crater counting. When the Apollo astronauts went to the moon, they picked up rocks and they were able to radiometrically date those rocks. And we had pictures of the areas that the astronauts landed in, so we could count craters, how many craters per square mile. And so they developed a correlation between how many craters were per square mile versus the ages of the rocks. And this became kind of what the lunar chronology. And they discovered that the moon died early. It quit having volcanism or anything like that very early, about the first billion years or so. So that's all fine. And what they have done now is they have basically applied that same geochronology to Mars. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details of that, but let me just tell you, we have a bunch of meteorites from Mars now. And if you take the average age of those meteorites, just say these were random samples of Mars' surface. Mars is next to the asteroid belt. It's accident prone. We know that. Big rock hits Mars, throws little rocks into space. They circle the sun and they end up on Earth. Okay, so if you take random samples of Mars' surface, and we have like close to 100 Mars meteorites, they're finding them all over the place. In Antarctica, in the deserts, places, and some of them just fall in plain sight. So this has given us, hors d'oeuvres of Mars, tasty samples. Now, if you take the average age of all those Mars meteorites, they're only about 500 million years old. How can you have a planet whose estimated age of its average age of its surface is like 3 billion years, meaning it died early, and yet it has all of these fresh lavas from Mars that are only 500 million years old? And what that means is that they've got this is called the Mars age paradox, by the way. And it's been debated, and NASA is very resistant to changing this geochronology. For one thing, it means that Mars died early. If there was life on Mars, it didn't have time to develop into anything. But in the meantime, we have this paradox. We have a bunch of young meteorites, less than 500 million years old, average age, and they supposedly come from a planet whose average surface age is 3 billion years. So it turns out the free parameter in these calculations is the cratering rate versus the moon. If Mars has a much higher cratering rate versus the moon, then everything on Mars becomes young. There's also the problem that we find water channels on Mars that are only not only in the heavily cratered areas, flowing in and out of craters and between them, but we find them on terrain that has almost no craters whatsoever. In fact, I discovered the Martian ocean is in the process of investigating Cydonia with the Independent Mars Investigation Team. We discovered, I discovered there was an old ocean shoreline near the face at Cydonia, and it's not on the old part of Mars, it's on the most youngest part of Mars with hardly any craters. And in fact, we know that the Leo impact, the sort of a Chicxulub event on Mars, occurred late in Mars history because there's no craters around it, as you said, secondary craters there are no craters of any kind around it to indicate that the age of the terrain that it impacted in was young. in geologic time.
Can I offer
So-
something here?
I'm sorry?
Can I offer something on that?
Please offer away, Mark. It's a great pleasure to be debating Mars with a fellow named Mars, by the way, because that's what Mark means.
Well, the question I had was, you're right about the moon and the crater counts and so forth, of course. But see, it's complicated with Mars because Mars has a history of having had ice sheets and still has ice sheets. And just like with
Yes.
the Oak crater, the crater counts method is usable to a certain extent, but not fully, because Mars also has erosion and Mars also has weathering that the moon does not. Of
Yes,
course.
it does.
And so we also have to be careful.
That's how they date they date the time from last resurfacing, last time the roads were
Right,
paved.
the last time resurfaced, right, exactly. The last time the roads were paved. That's a good way to put it. But the point being that, it's hard because we can't tell where the Martian ice sheets had migrated to in the past. We had ideas based on the mineral content. We look at the water runoff. Gale Crater, for instance, looks like an old lake. Okay, for all we know, it was.
Yes,
Jezero.
it was.
Same
It does
thing.
look like an old lake.
Yeah, in fact, I have models of Gale Crater that I've made, which are extremely accurate, which show all the data.
Good for you.
No, it's not. But see, the point I'm making is it's always been something that has intrigued me. I want to know though. We don't have the data on where the Martian ice sheets were at these different times in history because look, Mars is far away. Okay, and
Yes.
we are probably the only nation that has the most successful exploration of Mars. And little aside, Mars is the only planet in the solar system entirely populated by robots. Thought I'd throw it out there.
Hopefully
Go
that's not
ahead,
a sign of the future for the Earth, huh?
Well, AI is good for certain things, but telepresence is the best way to go. Deep ocean, outer space, inner space, outer space. But I like what you're saying about this. But we can't predict ice sheets, which will prevent cratering and mess with a crater count methodology. I'm all for it, and John, I'm not against your concept and the idea that there might have been a natural nuclear reactor. In 2011, you wrote about a natural nuclear reactor. We've seen them on Earth, right in Gabon, as we talked about, with the uranium. Okay. So the natural nuclear reactor, and I read your paper years ago, and I read it again the other day just to freshen up my thoughts on it.
That paper was well received when I gave it, by the way.
I remember. Okay. And the thing was that the natural reactor concept is not unfounded. It's not that you made something up out of the air. Okay. This is actually something happening here.
It happened on Earth already.
That's right. And so, I looked at, the quantities of cosmogenic elements and nucleides that were generated in the early universe. I looked at how they might have gotten to Mars, iodine 129 in particular,
right?
Because that has a half-life of 16 million years basically, and it all goes to xenon 129. And so, but the thing that I found about Mars, and I don't mean to jump into the isotopes yet, but I'll just mention it shortly here. The problem I have with the nuke theory is that the xenon 129 appears to have occurred and been made early in Mars history, because that would have meant that all the iodine 129 had time. It would have happened all within 100 million years, actually, of Martian formation. So I would think that all the xenon was very, very early. And now you'd say, well, wait a minute, the xenon would get lost. And it would, and it does. And ours did. Ours on Earth got lost as well, right? But it got locked up by these phyllosilicates, and it got locked up in the silicate structure in Mars. And that's where.
Okay, I know what paper you're referring to.
Well, I'm referring to several, but that's okay. I mean, but the point being that I, as a science guy, I don't discount anyone's theory. Okay, I look at them critically, and I let the evidence tell me which way to go and which way to sway. Currently, John, I sway toward the possibility that LIO was an impact from space.
Yes.
The valley structure around LIO really kind of seals that one because, you know, it's under the ejecta blanket, showing that it was probably meltwater that did it, you know, from an ice sheet or permafrost. And so that means it happened late in Mars history. Now, as far as the isotopes, well, that's a different discussion entirely, actually, for me.
Okay, Mark, let John continue on with his opening remarks if you're basically done there.
I am basically done. I was about to turn it back to him because I'm talking too much.
Go ahead, John.
No, Mark, and your points are well taken. However, I'll just lay it out for everybody. If you have a natural nuclear reactor, it has to run with a thermalized neutron spectrum. There's no other way you could do that. That's the way the ones on Earth ran. However, that doesn't produce xenon-129. It's like the difference between lighting a stick of dynamite with your lighter and watching it burn, and it produces a certain chemical signature. You know, and you can do that with dynamite. But if you put a detonator in it and trigger the detonator, it goes all at once with a shock wave, and it produces an entirely different set of chemicals, which, you know, like law enforcement studies. They can tell whether the dynamite burned in a campfire because the people were cold or whether it blew up. Now, when you have a slow neutron spectrum, you don't produce much xenon-129 at all. It takes a fast neutron spectrum, such as in a nuclear weapon, to produce large amounts of xenon-129. It's called R process. You can look it up on Wikipedia. R process means rapid intense bombardment of elements with neutrons.
As opposed to S process. Yeah, I get you.
As opposed to S process, which, you know, slowly cooks elements in stars. And to a certain extent, kind of, you know, you can kind of describe a thermal spectrum nuclear reactor that way. So the problem is the xenon spectrum that comes from a thermalized neutron spectrum in a natural nuclear reactor, which has to be moderated by water, by the way. You can't do it any other way. You don't get xenon-129 in large amounts. In order to get xenon-129 in large amounts, you have to have R process, which is a supernova explosion. Now, you also have to look for if there was a vast release of nuclear energy on rapid timescales, like in a hydrogen bomb. And the only place you find R process is in supernova or hydrogen bombs. Now they're talking about colliding neutron stars. That's an interesting debate, but they use the same codes, same computer programs at Livermore Oriental School, which was a nuclear weapons design lab. They use the same computer codes or programs to analyze supernova explosions as they did hydrogen bomb explosions, because the physics are so similar. So the xenon-129, now the other thing that happens when you inherit a bunch of iodine-129, iodine-129 is also produced in supernova explosions, and then it decays in 16 million years to xenon-129. But there's another thing, so that's 16 million years. There's another thing that is produced in supernova explosions and hydrogen bomb explosions, by the way, called plutonium-244. It was discovered at the first nuclear explosion, hydrogen bomb explosion. And plutonium-244 decays into primarily xenon-132. On Earth, the xenon-129 and 132 are basically balanced. One is due to iodine-129 decay, and the other is due to later decay of plutonium-244. And so that's the other shoe that has to drop. And the problem is on Mars, they can't find the plutonium-244 that should be there giving comparable amounts of xenon, only in the xenon isotope 132. So this is considered a big mystery ever since they discovered the xenon 129 anomaly on Mars. By the way, we dropped a probe into the atmosphere of Jupiter. And of course, you have our own planet, Earth. And we have the solar wind. We have meteorites from the asteroid belt. We grind them up and extract the xenon. It all shows xenon 129 and xenon 132 to be balanced. One guy called it the Dolly Parton distribution. 2 peaks. And so I'm, without getting into deep scientific detail, it's the other shoe. It's Sherlock Holmes. Yes, but the dog didn't bark. The dog that didn't bark was the plutonium-244. That means something extraordinary has to have happened on Mars. That didn't happen on Jupiter, didn't happen on Earth, didn't happen in the sun, where everything gets all, whatever. They believe the solar system started with a supernova. And so a lot of the solar system could not satisfy OSHA requirements when it first formed. It was partly radioactive. You would have loved this, Marc. We're talking astronomy here. So anyway, I'll just say the xenon 129, the natural nuclear reactor, was a great idea, and I liked it. And people at the conferences liked it.
I want to ask a question. Because for a dummy like me in science,
sure.
Is there a way to distinguish? Because Marc mentioned the Mars Climate Observer. Is there a way to distinguish a natural incident of a nuclear form or an artificial one that we can determine whether it was a natural? Because is it something that we can detect in the atmosphere?
Yes. Xenon 129 excess, way out of balance with xenon 132. That's the hallmark of our process, a supernova-like process or a hydrogen bomb-like process. S process produces basically xenon 129 and
that's slow. I understand your point there.
And it's slow, and it produces it doesn't produce much xenon 129 at all. In fact, what we have as a legacy of this supernova, which they believe started the solar system, the shockwave from it, was the fact that they find a lot of traces of extinct radioactive materials, like in the meteorites that date from the formation of the solar system from the asteroid belt. And they find plutonium-244 residues, and they find iodine-129 residues, and they both produce about the same amount of xenon. So you get xenon-132 and xenon-129. But if you produce if you do a hydrogen bomb, you get a lot of xenon-129. And now there's the argument. So basically, there's supposed to be 2 shoes that drop on Mars. One is the decay of iodine-129. Then there's the decay of plutonium-244 at 80 million years, roughly 4 times the length of time. So what process would have captured the xenon-129 on Mars and let the later xenon-132 escape? That's not possible. And so one guy suggested, the phyllosilicates, clays, trapped the xenon-129, but he didn't explain why the decay product of 244, which is like 132 and heavier xenon isotopes, why that escaped. So it was a paper, and it never made it into the refereed literature because if you look at the literature, there is no answer to this. They refer to it as a mystery. It's been 40 years since we found this thing on Mars, this feature, Xenon 129. It's been 40 years since we found it. It's still a mystery. And the main mystery is, okay, if you had a bunch of Xenon 129 decaying on, iodine 129 decaying on Mars, there should have been a lot of plutonium 244, but plutonium 244 from like a hydrogen bomb explosion, it doesn't produce that as efficiently. So you get a lot of, so the iodine 129 dominates, so you get more Xenon 129. And that's what happens. Then you get this big injection of iodine 129. You don't get as much plutonium 244 in a like a hydrogen bomb explosion, artificial. The supernova produces, both things in the same time. So anyway, so the other shoe, the plutonium 244 that they expected to find, that decay product, it's not there. So there was only one shoe that dropped on Mars. In other words, Sherlock Holmes, yes, the dog didn't bark. It means whoever got into the state, it was a racehorse was stolen, and the watchdog didn't bark, so it had to have been an inside job, is what he was. That was why it was such an important clue. So, Mark,
okay.
The dog didn't bark on Mars.
All right. Now, gentlemen, both your positions have been stated.
Who are you calling a gentleman?
Okay. All right. Jew guys.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a guy, I'm a gentleman when I want to be, but I'm just a guy.
So what we are fast approaching toward the top of the hour, which means at that point we're going to have to take a break. But at this point, I've got a coin. This is tails. This is heads. I'm going to flip this coin. Okay, Mark, I'm assigning you heads. John, I'm assigning you tails. And in this next little segment, we're going to start with your position. Now, here we go. Coin toss.
We just did that.
No, we didn't do it yet. Okay, I got tails. John, I want you now to start with your theory on what you think happened to Mars using your thesis. And then, Mark, I'm going to have you respond. Okay, so John, go ahead. What in your worldview happened on Mars, and approximately when did it happen?
Okay, based on the evidence of a large R process event on Mars, preferentially generating a lot of Xenon 129, and then which generated iodine 129, which then decayed into Xenon 129, or some of it was generated promptly. It looks like there was a massive R process, meaning rapid process, nuclear explosion, or perhaps two of them. We found radioactive hotspots on Mars. They're over where the old ocean used to be in the north. And by the way, Leo crater is not radioactive like these two hotspots are. If you look at these hotspots, there's nothing there. They're smooth. This looks like whatever happened in midair. So this does not look like a natural process. We also find evidence for intense neutron radiation of the younger rocks on Mars. And the two sites of the what appears to be the explosions, if you follow the shock waves, how they would have wrapped around the planet, especially because of the southern place being higher elevation, it looks like they came to a focus at the rough antipode of the explosions, meaning we had shock waves going all the way around the planet and piling up. radioactive potassium and thorium at one site. Thorium, by the way, is used in nuclear weapons. It was used in the big ABM missile test at Amchatka. So it appears there was this massive, the energy released was apparently greater than Chicxulub, the impact that wiped out the dinosaurs, and it happened on a planet only half the size of Earth. So this does not appear to have been natural. And as you know, there are things on Mars. There's a face on Mars at Cydonia and a pyramid next door to it, within about 6 miles of it. And then if you go around the planet, there's another site called Galaxis Chaos, where there are 2 faces, and one of them is closely resembles the face at Cydonia. We have new pictures of those. We have brickwork on the pyramid, some collapsed brickwork. So it looks like Mars was, this doesn't look like a natural event on Mars, and it looks like it may have been a targeted nuclear attack with a target, a civilization that was living on Mars. Now, by the way, my bottom line is we have to go up to Mars, boots on the ground, and find out what the hell happened up there to make sure it doesn't happen here. So that is my thesis, and my reasons, my evidence that I have in to back it up. The xenon 129 anomaly and the neutron irradiation of the rocks and the radioactive hotspots on Mars. And they're surrounded by glass, by the way, like trinitite, like at the nuclear sites. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay. Now, before I go to Mark, how many minutes do we have until the break?
5 minutes.
Yep.
5 minutes? Okay. Mark, please begin your response, and we'll pick up on the other side.
Okay. I haven't seen any trinitite results on Mars, and I'd be interested to see that. As far as the Mars faces, first of all, let me step back. The isotope overabundances. One thing we have to keep in mind is that Mars is unique in our solar system. There's nothing else like it in our solar system. We have no other planets that were potentially habitable in their early history and then not habitable. All right. It is a rocky terrestrial planet that has an atmosphere, and the atmosphere was a lot heavier in the past, and now it's been depleted. Venus was never like that. Venus never got out of its hot phase, so to speak. So Mars is a unique planet with unique processes that occur and have occurred on it. So it's true that we don't have answers for all the processes that have occurred. It's true we don't know where plutonium-244 signatures are, where they should be or expected to be. And that is a mystery. And so I can't jump to nuclear bombs right off the bat, because that to me seems like it's a little bit too early to even go down that path. So I feel, and this is something that has been shown, by that Brown paper, Brown University paper, that maybe some of these silicates, sequestered some of this xenon 129, and then they were released long term over 1 billion years or so, and that's a possibility. I don't see that as something that is something that could just be readily dismissed. It has to be investigated.
I will, Mark, just pardon me.
Yeah, of course.
That idea that the xenon 129 released a bunch of stuff that was absorbed then in some clays on the Martian surface and locked up, and then Mars lost its early atmosphere, and then this stuff oozed out. The problem with that is it would have also trapped the results of the plutonium-244.
Well, that's
that,
the
I
most-
mean, xenon is xenon chemically. I mean, there's different isotopes, but chemically they behave. This is a chemical process. The phyllosilicates would have trapped the plutonium-244 decay xenon also. And we would have ended up with just something like Earth or Jupiter or the sun or the soul, or the meteorites.
maybe so, and I'm not saying that that's not true, but I am saying that that process,
The dog didn't bark.
that process isn't something that we can definitively say happened anyway on Mars, but it is an idea. Now, I think the plutonium-244 is an interesting conundrum for me. Now, I do want to, though, go back a step and talk about something else you had mentioned. You talked about the Mars faces. I've battled with Richard Hoagland in the past about this, because I don't,
Richard, huh?
only he doesn't want to know me. I mean, I'm not a fan of like this D&M pyramid that he calls out on the surface. The pyramid's actually a natural shape that forms geologically too, based on conditions and environmental weathering. And that's something that is important.
Find me one on Earth.
Okay, well, there are several actually. The Sphinx, for instance, is a yardang, okay, that had been seen as a yardang, and then somebody probably made a monument to this lion
Sure.
cat creature, right? I mean, so the pyramid structure is also something that occurs.
Are you saying the
naturally in
Giza
geology.
pyramids are products
No.
of wind?
No, of course not. Don't be silly. Okay. No, but I was saying that, I feel that when we look at the face on Mars, with the Viking shot, unfortunately, that Viking shot made headlines around the world, but it was a very
Two of
poor,
them, 2 Viking shots.
it was a very poor resolution shot. The later ones from the Mars orbiter, that showed, and that was Malin Space Science Systems orbiter.
Malin Space Sciences, yes.
I gotta give us a little break here, guys. Keep your thoughts, Mark. We'll come right
Okay.
back to this.
I'm
We
sorry,
gotta
I'm
go to our
interrupting.
station break. Yeah, behave yourself, John.
He's passionate.
Anyway,
I get it.
we'll be right back after this message.
Don't tell me to calm down.
Hi guys, this is Gary from Pop Culture Minefield here on KGRA, and we're leaving for our first break. I
Hey,
hope
Mark,
we
you're doing
survive.
Great. Mark.
Did you know 75% of Americans
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Oh wow, we survived. Welcome back to the commercial break. Now for some more Pop Culture Minefield on KGRA.
Glad
All
we
right,
didn't.
John.
I didn't decide to take a comfort stop. I wouldn't have made it. That was a shorty.
All right. Do you want me to put Mark back center screen so he can finish?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Let's see,
And
where
I'm
was I?
sorry
Oh,
for
yes.
interrupting, Mark.
That's okay, John. Let me. Where was I?
I didn't want to talk about the Mars
okay,
bases on this thing. I wanted to just talk about the nuclear stuff.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the faces, and you mentioned brickwork.
That's
Don
fair
mentioned them.
game, John.
It is. As an image analyst, I've looked at probably, no lie, probably 100,000 different cases over time, and I've seen lots of claims for brickwork and things like that in imagery. And you have to be very careful to separate artifacts from the camera that are created by the camera and the natural occurrence on a planet. For instance,
Well,
depending.
before you proceed, Mark,
Yes, sir.
let me do this. Back in the day, and I'm talking about the early to mid 1990s, at that point, my wife Vicky and I were publishing UFO magazine. And
Remember
I
that.
think I can state with some authority that our publication was regarded as the finest of its type in the field, bar none. And I'd be willing to argue that point with anyone. But at that time, one of the great arguments that permeated the field concerned Mars, concerned the so-called face on Mars, and the fact that, among others, Hoagland and Dr. I'm trying to remember his name now.
Carlotto.
No, not Carlotto. Not Carlotto. He was prominent for a short time, then he kind of dropped out. He was a professor emeritus from New Mexico, had written a paper that they submitted to NASA about this. And Michael Mayland, who had the contract to handle the photographs, was playing everything very close to the vest. And even though this was a public funded by taxpayer dollars, NASA mission, Malin was the gatekeeper of who got to see these photos at the time and who didn't. And there were a lot of people very upset about that. Now, there was another Mars mission that was being prepared. And everybody in the field was screaming for NASA to go back and rephotograph that so-called monument, the Cydonia face. And initially, NASA did not even plan to put a camera on that mission. Do you guys recall that? Because I do.
I recall
do.
it, yes.
Well, the bottom line was they finally agreed to do that. And right before the mission took off, a tremendously destructive, powerful hurricane swept through the Caribbean and Florida, which delayed the launch. After the hurricane blew through, I believe it was Andrew, if my memory is correct, they took the capsule off to check the equipment to make sure that it suffered no damage from this catastrophic event. And they discovered something amazing. Incidentally, what they discovered to this day has never been successfully answered by anybody. They took that capsule into a clean room, they opened it up, they discovered that the camera inside the capsule, and they had this equipment hooked up to nitrogen lines to make sure no contaminants could get in. They found this capsule filled with debris, literally looking like floor sweepings, and some kind of viscous material had been smeared all over the camera lens. They had to take that thing apart, thoroughly clean it, and then No answer as to what happened. Well, I'll tell you what happened. Somebody had sabotaged that camera and that capsule. Had that thing gone to 0G, all right, on its way to Mars without being checked, that debris would have screwed up everything inside that capsule. And even if they got there, even if they had made it there, the camera would have been useless. Now, this mission was $1.5 billion in cost. I know. I called up NASA. I talked to their public spokespeople about this. We wanted to know what the hell happened, and they had no answer. They said at the time, we're going to have an investigation. Well, whether they did or they didn't, it never came to public light. The bottom line was 3 days out from the capsule approaching Mars, for some unimaginable reason, NASA turned off that probe. They turned it off. Then they turned it back on, and they claimed that they didn't get any goddamn response from it. The probe disappeared. Do you see some kind of MO here?
What I remember a mission disappearing, Don, and
That's the one, Mark.
Mars
That's the
Observer.
one.
yeah.
Mars Observer, yes. That's the one.
However, the MRO has been very successfully photographing lots of surface features,
Well,
including
it's a generation or so later. They
Yeah.
have different people in there. But
Yeah.
at the time, I maintain, Mark, hey,
Yeah.
I put my detective's hat on. Okay,
And you have a good
I thought
one.
about that.
Yeah.
I put my detective's hat on. Somebody, in my opinion, this is simply me speaking, nobody else. In my opinion, somebody wanted to sabotage that mission. Now, they did get later photographs of the Cydonia face, the famous cat box photos. As a matter of fact, this was a big thing for a while with Art Bell on Coast to Coast. Okay. Now, I don't often use Art Bell to make my points. I mean, I knew Art. Art was a great showman, with the operative word showman. Okay. But even Bell screamed to the high heavens about that. That photograph appeared to have been manipulated to blank out the so-called face on Mars. Myself, I believe that at some point in the distant past, something or someone carved that into that mesa. That's what I think. Can I prove it? No. But I do think that was an artificial construction. I'm sure you probably disagree with that, but I'd be interested to hear what your response is.
All right. Well, as far as the face, let's talk about the face. I did I think it was at that time NASA's Unexplained Files had me as their guy. I'm doing Proof Is Out There now on history, but when I did NASA's Unexplained Files, one of the things that they were going to do was the face on Mars. So what I did was I created a physical model of the face on Mars based on that released image that doesn't show the face, but makes it look like a hill with some really strange undulations in it. I lit it here in my workshop and with their cameras, and I showed the Viking image. Literally looked identical to the Viking image. And then when the light was changed and moved around, you could see that those features vanished. What was happening was, and this is my finding now, Don. This is my finding, okay? What was happening was your brain was filling in the other eye that you thought should be there because you saw a bridge of what might have been a nose and the beginning of a mouth. But there was a line going down that hillside in the photo that was not able to be seen in the original Viking photo. But with the higher resolution, you could. So what I did was I created in that physical model, I created all that detail, and the face model was only about this big. Okay. And it was a very detailed model, proper topography, all that stuff. Okay. And when lit from the side that Viking took the photo from, and when viewed with a lower resolution camera, it looked just like a face. It looked like a monkey face. It looked like a pharaoh's face with a headdress. I mean, you could see the face. And what was weird about it was there was no other eye. It was showing this eye, but this eye wasn't there. It was actually kind of a nondescript terrain, but your brain filled in the other side. Obviously, you know that we call that pareidolia, right? And I thought maybe that's what's happening here, because I actually didn't know the answer at the time. I wanted to make a very accurate model and use that to make a potential hypothesis about what happened. And so I viewed that as a potential pareidolia episode for that.
Okay, that's very plausible, and I applaud you. I applaud you on that. But I don't think that you can disagree, Mark, that NASA has continuously played fast and loose with the facts of this case. And I'll tell you exactly what I'm referring to.
Okay.
See, one thing my wife gets pissed off at me about is my
Vicky
memory.
gets mad at you?
Yes, my memory, because I don't forget a hell of a lot, okay? I remember back in the early 90s when this controversy was swirling all across the board about the face, that Senator Richard Lugar got involved. At the time, I think Lugar represented, I believe it was Indiana. Somebody can check on that just to make sure. But Lugar wrote NASA and demanded to know exactly if, in fact, they were withholding any information about this face. NASA got back to Richard Lugar and stated emphatically, we have other photographs of Cydonia, of the Cydonia face, that show it to simply be a fact of shadows and sunlight basically being misinterpreted. So Lugar demanded that NASA pull those photos out. Well, guess what? NASA didn't have any photos. And when they wrote Senator Lugar, they had to know then they didn't have any photos. In fact, what they were doing was bullshitting Richard Lugar, okay? And that came out. Hey, look, NASA has never been straight about their information. Do you, by chance, disagree with any of that?
I actually, no. I mean, I think that it's very strange in the science world. Let me explain, in my view, okay? Having been in that kind of world, when you're a researcher working on research and you're doing like acquisition of data from a planet or whatever, that is your commerce, that is your trade material, that is your intellectual property obtained by a funded probe by public, but the research is yours. And so what they do is they guard the research, they guard the results, and John knows this. They guard the results of your work until it's ready for publication. And if it takes 5 years, 10 years for it to be published, it's still your protected work until it can be released. Now, I'm not saying that that's an excuse. I'm saying that that is something that happens. Guaranteed. I know it for sure. Okay. So we know that that happens. So oftentimes, I think that that can get misinterpreted. And I don't dismiss these other claims, Don. Don't get me wrong. I think it can get misinterpreted as NASA's hiding something from us. It's the same thing as NASA cut the International Space Station feed right at that moment when the UFO appears, when in fact they simply passed over an area where there's no ground station, which they do often when they go over China and Asia. Okay. So, you know, there are things that get assigned to NASA labeling them bad guys when in
Yeah.
fact it's probably not.
But
But I don't deny it. I don't deny that.
the field
Go
I come from, okay, was criminal investigation.
You know,
If I had a case that I had to go into court and raise my hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God, okay, I better have my facts straight. And I didn't hide my facts. I handed it to the court and the entire planet. This is what we found. NASA doesn't do that. And NASA, in fact, Mark, in my opinion, okay, now I'm not disagreeing with Marc Dantonio, but I'm just saying, in my opinion, NASA has been a damned liar on many occasions.
I don't disagree with that. There's weird stuff. I mean, when we made the moon landings, okay, and yes, we did go to the moon. I don't want to hear it, okay. Okay.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Mark.
Okay. When NASA covered the moon landings, okay, yeah, I mean the Russians were monitoring our transmissions. They knew we were there. If there was a fraud, they would be the first ones to call it out because we beat them. Okay, anyway, when we did the moon landings, okay, all of the things that happened on the moon. I had a point here. Damn it, I just lost it. Damn.
This happens frequently when you talk with Don.
Decker, what are you doing to me, man? I love it. I love Decker.
If I may, I just want to interject. I want to share from ESA, the European Space Agency, because the debate is about the past, and I'm thinking more about present and some of the images that we're taking from this area. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly and show you guys some of the more recent images of this area. Now, this is some kind of a natural form skull that they say is like a skull formation. But if you look at some of the images now, I mean, this is an actual.
Looks like a flying saucer. Oh,
I mean, I can see the face from here in that. I mean, I can see what could pass as a face.
Look at this area here. It does look like some sort of like pyramid formations, but Mark, can this just be natural formations from activity on the surface, geological?
Well, not even just geological, but erosion and weathering. Because I mean, Mars, you got to remember, Mars has an atmosphere. Mars had a heavier atmosphere. Mars had weathering. Mars had lots of water. Okay, and when it finally got out of the Hesperian epoch into the Amazonian epoch where it is now, then that ended up locking the water all up, and it ended up in permafrost. You know, I don't think anyone disagrees with that scientifically. And those are good images, Bill. And in all of those, where you showed the face from different oblique angles, I could see where the face was, and that's, I think, because I built a model of the face, a very accurate model of the hill, as produced by MSSS, Malin Space Science Systems, when they produced that image. And we used that on the show, and from different angles, I would turn it around. I even painted it to look like Mars. Okay, and as you turn it around, you can actually see the face from different angles, or what would pass as the face. But when you got to the right-hand side of it and looked at it from the right, there was no face visible. If you turned it to the left, you could see how the other side was probably the continuation of the face, and your brain built the rest of it.
Skywatcher, go back to that picture again, if you would, of the face.
Okay, hold on.
Sideways. Sideways face.
We have to consider erosion as well, right? I mean,
yes, and weathering from wind. Now the atmosphere, again, it's only 600 pascals, which is like.
Is that the one, Don?
No.
Okay.
No, I think it's further down.
Okay, let me know.
Right there. Back up. Is that it? No.
The one down below it, Don. That one.
Yeah, that one. Zoom in on that.
Okay, that's how I can.
Yeah, that's as far as I can go.
Yeah.
So you can see how on the far side there could be something like an eye socket, and you can see a bump that could be a nose. You can see a part of a mouth, but look to the right, and it just becomes a hill. There's no eye socket. Your brain is building.
Actually, that looks like it's damaged. The right side.
Well, I
right.
mean, it looks like it's slumped. It looks like there've been some terrain slumping there, which could have occurred from vibrations from impacts, weathering, erosion. That's the problem, Don. This is a dynamic planet, as barren and arid as it is. It was a dynamic planet for several billion years, right? Until it became locked up, until its atmosphere was depleted, relatively.
Now,
So,
one of the
and
areas
I've
I'm going to
always,
talk about here that I'm an expert
yeah.
in, which is graphic reworking of photography. I've been working at it for 30 years. And if you go back to that previous image, there is a swirling in that image that shouldn't be there. And that bothers me.
Where's the swirling that you're talking about?
The swirling occurs in the, if you look to the far left and as it curves underneath to the right, there's a swirling going on photographically, and that
Are you
bothers
talking
me.
about here, Gary? Right around here?
No, down below. Right there, start up a little bit to the right, you're right. There you go. Swirling there. Now start scooping low and to the right, and there's swirling going on in that image. That shouldn't be there.
Okay, this is not
manipulated.
This isn't the high res image. It's probably, that could be an artifact of
It could be, but
countless
it's just my
savings.
eyes are immediately drawn to that as a guy
Yeah.
who manipulates photos for a living.
Well, yeah, and I'm as a photo analyst, I also do that kind of thing, and I actually analyzed the newest Face on Mars image that they produced, the one that everybody says, "Oh, look, it's just a hill."
Right.
And I did find that there was no photo manipulation of the high res original image. That was just how it was. The only thing that was manipulated was the lighting was increased and enhanced, the gamma, so to speak, in order to bring the basic brightness up and pull some details out of the dark. That's the only thing that was changed.
By the way, I'd like to respond at some point.
Take it away,
I've
John.
been what?
John, take it away.
No, Marc.
Do it.
Is Marc done? Is Marc done for right now?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Okay. Don, I'm not going to get into any NASA activities in the past, or even
NASA bashing.
the activities of Malin
Somebody
Space
still works
Science
with NASA.
Systems. What?
Somebody
Okay.
still works with NASA.
Who does?
He's
You
suggesting
still
you
work
do.
with them through the DoD. I suggest that you still have
No,
connections.
DOD
I'm not
and
trying
NASA
to
are
make
not
you
the
look
same.
bad. I'm just saying, if I still did work with people, I wouldn't want to shit on them either.
No,
I don't
well,
give a crap. I'll do it anyway. If they did something wrong, I'll
Marc,
call them
Marc,
out.
Marc, you're certainly aware of the Brookings report, right? Where they talked
Yeah.
about the possibility of finding artifacts on Mars and the moon, and
By the way,
and
I'm
that this
the guy
has
that
the
found
potential
that.
to be devastating to
Marc,
society.
Marc,
We're
I'm
not,
the guy that found that.
All right.
yeah, and okay, so I'm not going to talk about that. Let's just talk about the images of the face. And in my book, Death on Mars, I have all the pictures, all the frame numbers from the high resolution pictures, not only of the face at Cydonia and the pyramid, which is nearby it, but also the faces at Galaxis Chaos. And, to me, despite erosion, the same product, the same environment allows intelligent life to emerge on a planet, also causes erosion. We both agree with that, right?
Yeah, I mean the weathering and the atmosphere.
Right. Look at pictures of the Sphinx when it was first started being photographed.
Yep.
It looked pretty bad. The Egyptian Tourist Board has dressed it up quite a bit. Have you seen those pictures of what it looked like?
Yeah, I mean it was sandblasted for centuries.
And they say somebody blasted off the nose with a cannonball. I don't know.
Who
These
knows
are
if
just
that's true?
reports. This is a report on the internet. I don't
Yeah,
know. So things are, any artifact you're going to find on Mars, if it was a dead civilization, would have to show erosion. But there ought to be some details that are left. Now, in the case of the face of Cydonia, we have a lot of really good pictures of it. The original cat box image, by the way, was taken at an oblique angle in morning light, completely different lighting, completely different viewing angle than the Viking pictures. And you have to then morph in between those two. Now, Marc Collado used a shape from shading model based on the Viking pictures, which showed the thing to be basically just a dome, a simple dome-like structure. And when he unwrapped it that way, so to view it as it was viewed from above, it looks like the Lion Man from Wizard of Oz, complete with nostrils in the nose. Have you seen those pictures?
I have not. I haven't seen
Marc,
that stuff. I haven't.
Marc.
No, I'm
okay,
not.
they're in my book, Death on Mars. And we presented that at a scientific conference 2 months after they took the pictures of Cydonia and declared the case closed. A person from JPL showed up and was so enraged he attacked Vince DiPietro because, you know, we have this picture and it shows nostrils in the nose, which actually are seen even in the oblique view. It also shows ornaments on the top of the helmet, which are similar to seen on the Olmec heads on Old Mexico. Don't ask me why. Those would be similar, but then they never show the picture of the pyramid in the face in the same pictures from NASA. And if you look at, it's in the book, Death on Mars. I have all the frame numbers, everything. You can look at all, check it all up. And you have a face like a pyramid, you know, not a facet like a pyramid. And then right in the middle of it is this little square section, almost a perfect square. And it's decayed brickwork. We have similar things on this. So then we go to Galaxis Chaos. We found a similar face, and it's got similar eyes, nose, mouth, and it's got ornaments around the nose and you know, the same kind of helmet. It's more like a sphinx-like structure, headdress, than a helmet like in the face at Cydonia. The face of Cydonia looks like one of the Olmec heads, and the face at Galaxis Chaos looks more like the Sphinx.
Yeah, I have to. I would like to mention
please,
something.
I advise you to look at those pictures, and I will be happy to show up at the MUFON convention and show everybody this stuff.
I'm sure, you know, like I said,
and you can respond there once you see the pictures, and you'll see all the frame numbers in my book. You can look up those frame numbers on the NASA websites.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I see Carlotta's pictures now. I'm looking at them right now.
Good.
And I'm not seeing anything that indicates other than a hill, to be honest.
The nostrils and the nose.
Yeah, I don't.
You see those?
I don't see nostrils and a nose. I mean, I understand.
Can we share this image so everybody can see?
Yeah, let's let everybody see if they see. Do I win by a nose or not?
Well, I still have to respond to something else. And I'm trying to go back to it. It's something you mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay. Well, here, let me just say, I didn't invent this stuff. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just doing my job as a scientist. We went through a nuclear crisis called Able Archer 83 at Sandia Labs where I was working. Morale at the lab plummeted. Everybody was so terrified of nuclear winter and a nuclear war. They were afraid for their families. When I saw the Face on Mars things over the Christmas break of 83, I thought, oh, we're saved. We'll find a dead civilization on Mars possibly, and that'll end the Cold War. So that's why I got involved in this stuff. I'm just a plasma physicist. I was trying to work on controlled fusion. I was working on directed energy weapons too. And so at a nuclear weapons lab. Now, so I didn't invent this stuff, but once I get involved in something scientifically, I try to finish the job. Now, I'll be happy to come to the MUFON convention and present all of this stuff. Everything.
I want to ask both of you a quick question.
Well, I had to respond first, Bill.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yes. Okay, Mark, respond.
Okay, you when you talked about, you went back to the brickwork and all that stuff. One of the problems I have with those ideas, and I brought this up in a bunch of discussions I've had with folks over the years, and that is on Mars, as we're learning, Mars has a lot of sedimentary rock. The sedimentary rock breaks out in layers, and we see right now today with Perseverance and looking at the rovers, the Perseverance rover images. There's one image, for instance, that shows a real layered outcrop.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and you see
looks
spikes,
Earth-like.
and you see spikes sticking out, and people say, "Look, spikes, evidence of something." Blah blah blah, and they go off down the alien thing. And again, I believe aliens are out there. I think they're here. How about that? And I've got reasons why I believe they're already here. Right, so I'm not against that at all. I'm all for it. I just want to be hard on the data. Now those spikes, for instance, those are minerals that didn't erode as fast as the sedimentary rock around them, and so they get exposed, just like Devil's Tower in Wyoming. It was a plug of periphery lava that was actually underground, and it was exposed over time as the sediments around it got weathered away, and that just left the big lava plug sticking up, and that became Devil's Tower. You can tell that's how it worked, because at the top it's the most weathered and it's the least weathered at the bottom. Okay, well, with Mars, we see a lot of these sedimentary outcrops, and when you see them from space, you're seeing the ridge lines. You're seeing these what look like regular areas, and it is interesting. It is very intriguing. But to call it brickwork, for me, is just a little over the top. I can't do that, because
can anyone call up the picture of the face of the pyramid at Cydonia?
I might have this. Maybe is this the one here? Let me.
It's the one that was released by Malin. It's actually a composite of 3 pictures.
Is it a Carlotto image? 35A72 and 70A?
No. This is a later image from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter.
Okay. Let me see if this
I've
is
got
the
it
one.
here.
You got it? Throw it up
I've
there.
got one.
All right. Well, this is the one I have here that I just put up down there.
Okay, let me see. Let me add yours. Oh,
That's the one I think you said had the square thing in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay. And see, what I'm looking at is that now you can see my cursor.
No, that's not it.
I know, but that's the square thing you're talking about.
is it this one?
That's not it either. That's the face. Let's
Right.
look at the pyramid, which is nearby, which is on the same frame, 7813, as subsequent frames. They're right next to each other.
Let me
Well,
pull
let's
this
keep
up.
going.
There we go. I'm adding it now. There you go.
Those are the pyramids at Elysium. No. Okay, there you go. Okay. Have you got anything of higher resolution than that? This is the one released by Malin Space Sciences.
I'm looking. I found one. This is actually on NASA's website. Let me see if this is better.
Yeah, it should be on NASA's website. By the way, I challenge anyone to find on Google Earth a structure like this on Earth in some isolated area that has never been touched by human hands.
There you go.
I
That's the one
challenge
from
anyone.
NASA.
Okay, there. Okay, could you enlarge that?
No. I'm sharing it on the
enhance it?
screen. No.
Okay, at the risk of people getting eye strain,
If I
look
share
at
it
the
on my
very
screen, I
center
can.
of that one face. There's a little square.
What face?
Open image.
I mean, facet.
All right, let me try it this way.
Okay.
The facet of the
Let me try it
pyramid.
this way.
Oh well.
That's
Anyway,
Hold on, give me a
Brandenberg,
sec.
calm
Jesus
down.
Christ. Oh my God, John.
He's
All right.
trying to put it into a.
Now I can
Oh,
enhance
you
it.
don't like to be pressed on screen.
Hey, we're
right?
having a debate here. Okay, there you go. There you go. That's better. Okay, Mark,
Yes, sir.
do you see that little square
Holy
section?
shit, is that Elvis?
Where's the square? I don't see a square. Where is it?
I'm looking for it.
Move right here. Okay. There's a facet on the pyramid, the one closest to us, the one at the bottom of the picture. Then you
Okay.
see a square. Oh,
John's
there,
getting
there you go.
impatient.
There you go. Right there. Right there. Mark, do you see that?
Where's the square?
It's right in
Where
front
is
of
it
you.
on the
It's on
Is
the
it on the
facet of the
facet?
pyramid.
It's center screen right here.
Yes. No. It's move.
Yes.
It's
No.
a square.
It's right in the front, on the front side. There's a
Yeah,
square.
if only
on the
you were
front
sharing
side.
this, then you would know where to
Go to
fucking
your left.
go.
Go to your left. Go to your left. Go to your
Can
left.
anyone else see it?
It's okay.
Bill,
hold
Bill
on. Stop.
only.
Everybody
Bill, where
stop.
do I go?
Everybody stop. It's centered in
I
the
see it.
facet, above center on the facet.
I
Yeah.
see the
Right.
square. I
Okay.
see it right now.
It doesn't look like a full square. It actually looks like
Right there.
That
that's
one.
what.
Well,
yeah. Now
yeah,
see,
the,
that's
bo-
what
the,
happens.
the bottom is the bottom part is missing, and it's a landslide
That's right.
has released a almost perfectly square region.
Right angles don't
Yeah.
occur in nature.
Actually, on Mars, they actually can, and I've
Oh,
seen that they
boy.
do. And here's what I'm getting at: when you look at the way crystal lattices are made and the way the rock structure fractures, you will often find that you'll get very regular splits like that. I'm not saying that that's what this is. I'm just saying
It's
that.
not a giant salt crystal, Mark.
Yes, I understand, John, but the rock itself, okay, has fracture lines that they'll follow. Every rock does.
How can it make a facet like in a pyramid and then a square section in the middle of it?
I don't know. I that's
Well,
I'm not
look,
I don't know
one
how that
one
can happen.
geologist, I'll tell you, Mark, one geologist told me that a good geologist can explain Mount Rushmore as due to natural processes. Now we know that Mount Rushmore does not owe its appearance to natural processes, but given long enough and enough erosion forces and everything, you can always get them. The reason people recognize faces, by the way, picking them out of the noise, is because that gave us survival value in the jungles and
That's
forests.
what I've always said that. Yes, it's a way
Right.
to
If you can recognize a face, even
Yeah.
wearing war paint or camouflage through the woods, you'll live long enough to have more children.
That's correct.
You can also recognize straight lines if it's a spear or an arrow flying at you, and you're real quick to recognize that.
That's right, and that's what.
If you sit there and say, "Well, I could be having pareidolia here," no.
Well, that's where pareidolia comes from. In fact, I mean, that's the evolution of the brain to recognize threats and to watch out for people that you know. It tries to make a known pattern out of the unknown, out of the chaos.
Well,
and that's
what
why we see bunnies and
served
clouds.
us well? I mean,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
it gives
no,
the human visual system gives false alarms. We call that pareidolia.
Yeah,
Now,
no, I get that.
I will
get that.
freely admit a lot of stuff people are finding on Mars is just purely natural stuff. And these people, but Cydonia Mensa with the face and the nearby pyramid and then the faces at Galaxis Chaos, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what that means, even allowing for erosion.
Hey, John, I know a rocket scientist.
But it will take a geologist in situ to make the final determination.
Well, let's send one up there then.
I'm very happy. I think that's a great idea.
I mean, if we find evidence of a nuclear holocaust, just completely separate from anything artificial finding on Mars, it looks like a big nuclear holocaust occurred on Mars with our process.
Yeah, I don't.
Our process,
I don't
not
think
S
I agree with
process,
that.
our process.
I know what you mean.
Okay.
You know.
If we see that, then we see what looks like remains of a, archaeology. Then the responsible thing is to investigate very aggressively as to what this. You're aware of Fermi's paradox, right?
Of course. Wrongly attributed
live
to
in a
him too,
ghost
by the
town.
way.
What?
Wrongly attributed to Fermi as well. It was middle of a discussion he was having with a bunch of scientists. So
Yeah, I actually have the discussion. And you
yeah,
said,
but it
where
was
the hell
wrongly
are they?
attributed. Yeah, but it was not. It became his paradox when in fact it was a bunch of people talking about it.
Well, Fermi and a bunch of other guys. Paradox, then, right? Okay.
I guess, yeah.
He's the guy who framed the big question: where the hell are they? Now, of course, you're part of MUFON, and you believe that there are possibly alien visitations going on right now. That we're you've already gotten over the hurdle that we're not alone in the universe.
That's right.
And I'm just saying, it's a phrase I picked up in Wisconsin when I lived there. I'm just saying, you find evidence of a possible nuclear holocaust. I don't know what happened on Mars. I just know what the evidence indicates. And then you find what looks like archaeology. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, especially in a mostly silent universe, that we should investigate this very aggressively.
John, what is your estimated time frame for this Holocaust?
Oh, it looks like it was about 500 million years ago. Roughly the same average age as the Mars meteorites. Marc, yeah, the
So
Mars meteorite age paradox is a great one.
Somewhere between 300 and 500 million years ago?
Yeah, about 500 million years ago, give or take.
Now, at that time period, Earth barely had multicellular life on it, correct?
I know. So this would have, if I'm correct, and I by the way, I published the Sidonian hypothesis after finding the faces at Galaxis Chaos and examining all of the face. The Sidonian hypothesis is that Mars was like Earth in the past and gave rise to a humanoid intelligence. Very simple.
Now, is there or is there not theory today that theorizes that Martian life through one or another processes ended up coming to Earth?
Yeah,
and
in bacterial form, yes. I believe if there's a dead civilization on Mars, it looks like it was completely independent of our civilization. But that tells you something about the universe. If you talk, there's what's called the principle of mediocrity. Mediocrity says that the human race is fairly representative, sadly, of intelligent life in the universe. Earth and its evolution of biology and the fact that we were produced, warts and all, we are mediocre. Not a term I like to bandy about, Marc.
Well,
but mediocrity says that we are average for the universe.
We're average for a civilization that's gone through 5 major extinction events and still persevered. We're average for a civilization that's come about after 4.6 billion years.
Yes.
In a habitable zone with a star that's actually not too good for us. In fact, our star is not an optimum star. So there's so many. It's true, right? I mean, you know that.
Find me a place to move to. We'll move the Earth there.
I know, right? Yeah, no, it's not the best star for us.
Okay, then we have Mars and we have mediocrity and we have Fermi's paradox. Let me give you an analogy. My first wife, bless her heart, started getting terrible stomach pains, nausea, and started running a fever. Took her to the emergency room. The doctor argued with her, saying, well, looks like appendicitis, but your blood count isn't up. And finally, the surgeon charges in, and he looks like a kind of a fighter pilot kind of character. He pokes her, and he says, "Does that hurt?" And she said, "Yes." And she said, "Did it hurt when you ran over bumps on the freeway coming here?" And she said, "Yes." And he turned to the nurse and said, "Prepare the operating room number 3. We're taking out that appendix." And he turns to me and he says, as they're wheeling her away, he says, "We like to remove at least 2 or 3 healthy appendices per year here, because the consequences of, letting one burst can be fatal." He says, "But the operation itself is fairly routine and safe." And as it turns out, she was just about to have a burst appendix. And the original doctor, who was an internist, internal medicine guy, came and apologized to her for arguing with her. In fact, he asked her at one point, "Could you be pregnant?" And she turned to me, she was really smart, and said, "Nothing is ever wrong. Nothing is ever wrong with a woman except she's pregnant." It was a great moment. That's why I married her. Got a really beautiful kid out of it. Anyway, so I'm just saying, Mars has appendicitis. So does the whole universe. I say, operate. Operate.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was a great story, and I understand where you're coming from, and I'm all for further exploration of Mars. You'll notice that I haven't sit here and just summarily dismissed all the things you were saying, John, and that was because I
Thank you,
am
Mark.
I am
And
open-minded.
I have not dismissed what you're saying either.
No, you haven't, and that's why
You're
that's why.
representing the mainstream view of astrogeology.
Well, I'm actually representing what I feel is my view, and it might represent the mainstream view. But I don't believe everything the mainstream view tells me anyway. I just need to research it for myself, right? I mean, but how do I get a hold of that research? Well, read the Astrophysical Journal, read these other journals, go on ResearchGate and look up stories, go to Archive and ArcViz and get all this data to examine and pour over before I produce something to discuss, right? And that's very smart and very important to do. But who's gonna, the average person isn't going to do that. So I look at it as my job, if you will, is to absorb all that information, make heads or tails of it, and then produce it in a way that everybody can understand it. Because science, for me, is supposed to be for everybody. It's not for the elites. It's not for the ones with all the degrees. It's something that everybody should be able to understand, because then they can be entreated, then they can be educated, then they can be involved. And that's kind of what I do. That's why I started SkyTour live stream, as Don mentioned earlier. The observatory sessions that we do, was to bring astronomy to the masses and show people what's up there. Now, as far as Mars goes, I looked at Mars the other night with our telescope.
Good.
And of course, it's a little farther away, so it's only a dot. But we have a third observatory going in, and we're going to have a telescope that can actually look at Mars and see surface features a little bit better than this one. All right. But I think Mars is a very interesting place. I've always been drawn to it. But you got to remember, Mars is a special type of incubator. There's no other incubator like it in the entire solar system. So we're bound to find anomalies there. And we have. As far as the potential life that's on Mars, I would think that after an aerial survey with the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MRO, and all of the data that we've found, we would have seen artifacts of a civilization that are unmistakable and something that you can't argue with. The face on Mars is arguable. It's not potential. The square in that pyramid, I think that's interesting, but I'd want to research how it could happen. Slumping sides and a landslide, if you can think of a manner in which it can happen, you have to investigate thoroughly as to whether that really did happen.
Look at the collapsed pyramid in Egypt. There's a pyramid that they got half built and then it collapsed, and they have a square section missing like that.
Okay. Well, see, that's data that we would take. Okay. Now, and then we have to look at natural pyramid formation, which also occurs. I mean, there's natural pyramids on Earth that have occurred that way. So I think that We can't just assume a pyramid structure was artificial. We have to investigate whether a natural process could explain it. So, in other words, yes, I'm being cautious, but no, I don't believe in the actual dogma of science and just stick to it religiously like a religion. I will not do that.
Okay, guys, we've got roughly just 5 minutes until the show is complete.
Oh, I thought so. It starts.
Yeah.
This wasn't
yeah.
the pre-show?
No.
Oh,
So,
man.
so what I'd like to do is give both of you guys roughly a minute and a half or 2 minutes to finish up with your final thoughts. Marc, why don't you take it away? Let's say 2 minutes, and then John will have 2 minutes.
Okay, well, again, Mars, as I just mentioned, is a fascinating one-off incubator in our solar system. There's a lot of strange processes we have yet to understand. There's anomalistic isotopes on the surface, an overabundance of some, an underabundance of others that we have yet to explain. And I would like to see further research done before, saying that there was some type of nuclear war there. I think the problem is that we tend to suggest that, and I mean, every civilization will have a nuclear era. I believe that. But we also, if you look at our planet from space, you can't miss the human endeavor that's occurred here. You can see the sprawling city complexes. You can see the lights of highways. You can see shrimp fleets in the ocean. Okay, you can see a lot of things that say there's habitation here. Now, if we were gone, the cities would still be there. They'd be sprawling, but they'd be covered by some vegetation because we have vegetation. What about on Mars? If there was a city in the Cydonia complex, there's nothing to say that they would have a city like ours, for sure, guaranteed. However, we would see signs of habitation. The pyramid doesn't do it because the pyramid can occur naturally. We have them here. The face doesn't do it because it doesn't look like a face from all sides. It doesn't look carved. It looks shaped by its natural processes. And the latest photos that I looked at were real, and I verify for me that they're real. So I think that the whole point is that there are questions on Mars, but I think that we will be there again. We're going back again for sure. They've already got other missions planned. You suggested a few things about the NASA inability to share the truth. There's some validity.
NASA, never a straight answer.
Hey, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's why you're the big talking head.
Well, let's give John his 2 minutes. John.
Okay, I want to thank Marc for his presence here and his learned comments.
Likewise.
But at the same time, I have found what looks like strong evidence of a thermonuclear holocaust on Mars based on isotopics, glass at the sites. It does not appear to have been natural, and that means we have to go up there, boots on the ground, find out what the hell happened so it doesn't happen here. Now, there are signs that look like archaeology on Mars to some people. And that means if this was a nuclear holocaust, it may have been a targeted nuclear attack. Now, we live in a universe that is very silent. We would expect to be soap commercials and political ads and everything bombarding us from every side. This is Fermi's paradox.
Well, this will definitely be fodder
something is out
for
there.
Another show, guys, because we are, in essence, totally out of time.
Okay.
I want to thank both Marc.
Them's my words.
John. I want to thank both Marc and John for their appearance today. It was great, guys. This truly was one for a keeper. And
we got to thank our super sticker. We got to thank our super sticker, Darius Munchausen. and all the comments that we did not get to. I want to apologize. There were a lot of great comments and questions that were asked by our chat that we never got to.
I did see a bunch.
I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. But anyway, Don, send us out.
Yeah, so that is it. Gary and I will be back at 1 p.m. Pacific time for Dangerous Military Nerds. God willing, and the river don't rise with this cold I have, and we'll see you then. Hey, thanks for tuning in, gang.